Welcome to Family Addiction Coaching, a podcast about families supporting a loved one with addiction. Each episode will provide insight into a real family's experience, what families find useful and not, what is available in the community, and what would help make their journey easier. Similar to what happens in our coaching service, we'll discuss how families have encouraged their loved one into recovery, as well as their own family recovery. We'll also discuss harm reduction, an especially useful approach for those with no current interest in recovery. I'm your host, Patrick Doyle of Family Addiction Coaching. With a master's degree in social work, I'm licensed by the state of Massachusetts and comply with the strict code of ethics of the National Association of Social Workers. You were going through opioid withdrawal.
Yes, it was really bad. No, I could barely get to his truck. I was freezing. My nose was running. I was sore. I had no energy. My whole cell, the whole floor of it was covered with tissue from the whole night. It was like a tissue carpet in there. It was disgusting. And I was a wreck and I was shivering and I kept rolling the window down and rolling it back up because my blood pressure was out of control and I was getting hot and cold and hot and cold. So he's driving and his daughter's sitting in the seat next to him and I'm rolling the window up and down and up and down. And I'm kind of like crouched over because my stomach hurts. And he asked me, what is it? And I just said, it's heroin.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, she had all the family send me cards while I was in rehab and everything. I got so much mail, wonderful letters and cards from everybody. It was really great. That's all because of her.
While the podcast series is primarily on families, this is an opportunity to also hear from someone who has lived through addiction, is very close to her parents, and has a lot of insights into what it was like for them. So I want to welcome you, Amanda.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad you asked me to do this. I hope to be really open and tell my story in a way that people can relate to it.
You have struggled with serious addiction. In the aftermath of that, you've had some medical issues which bring about a lot of serious pain. And I think it'd be useful if you could give a brief overview of your life journey, a little bit about your background and your family and the kind of environment that you grew up in as a child, and we'll proceed from there. How does that sound?
It sounds good. And thank you. It was a huge compliment. I appreciate it. I grew up and I was born and raised in Detroit. My mom and dad, only child, and they're hard workers, come from a family of hard workers, skilled trade, and went to Catholic school, had a really close community with friends at school, and it was a nice tight-knit group. And then when I was around 10, we relocated to a smaller, nice little boating town about an hour north of Detroit. And for some reason, things changed then. I had access to cable TV. I was in public school. It's like this adjustment period where my mom was adjusting. We were all adjusting. And something kind of started. I don't know if it was because I had DARE classes in 5th grade or if it was just having access to MTV or whatnot. But I became really curious about drugs at a young age, around 12 and 13 years old. And before I even did them, I read about them. I would go to the school library and get books out and read about these drugs. And I was so intrigued by Alice in Wonderland and LSD and how it was made and who made it and all this sort of stuff. And I just kind of started to grow into, my likes, dislikes changed, things changed, my friends changed, everything like this. And the area is really close to a city that has a lot of unemployment, poverty, and drug use and such. And that's where I spent most of my adult life. That's where I made my friends at and lived at, after I turned 18 and everything. And I loved it, but it was different environment and like community that I had grown up with as a child. I had started using drugs like LSD or acid and marijuana by the age of 15. And when I was in high school, I was selling acid to friends. And then by the time I was 18, I had tried cocaine and heroin and mushrooms and, anything I could get my hands on. If I could do it and if it was available, which most things were, I wanted to do it. I wanted to try it. And unfortunately,
Pardon me. It sounds like you did it for fun. You liked it.
I did.
Or it made you feel good, or
I did like it. Yeah, I probably liked it too much. But I did suffer from depression at a young age, and I was in therapy at the age of 12. My parents put me in therapy, and that was consistent for a long time. So I don't really know if it had anything to do with that. I don't know if I was like looking for something else or if I was looking to numb something or whatnot, but I don't have any like sexual abuse history or any extremely, traumatic events that had happened in my life. My parents didn't get divorced. I just didn't really experience any harsh trauma.
And so, pardon me, so you're not aware of a real clear link to the drug use as, well, there's an expression called self-medicating, symptoms of depression. So that's not real clear to you.
Not really clear. No, like I have a theory as to why my drug use got worse as time went on, but no, I'm not really clear on exactly what that could be. And while I was in therapy, I never really exposed my drug use to my therapist. So I wasn't really able to work on that with anybody.
Do you have a sense as to why it didn't come up in the therapy?
Oh, definitely. I didn't want to get in trouble. I didn't want to, I didn't want anything to change. And the funny thing is that like I had a really good therapist. I really liked her, really got along, and she was so good and helpful with me, but she had me under substance use therapy. I wasn't there just for regular therapy. And she used to tell me that, we have to consider this substance use therapy because you need to come in every 2 weeks. So, and the only way to see you every 2 weeks is if it's substance use therapy. So I think she probably had her, I think she probably knew, but we didn't really talk about it. I always said, oh, no, I'm not doing any drugs. No. And I didn't want my parents to find out. I didn't know, they tell you everything is private in most cases. And I just didn't really trust that. So,
right. Because you were a juvenile. Right. You were less than 18.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how can your parents could have access to all of your medical information? How can you really be upfront with knowing that your parents could have access to that? And your parents were not aware of your drug use or maybe to the extent?
Definitely not to the extent. I mean, when I was around 15 or so, they started to drug test me at home, but I managed to pass.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, they thought that I was on speed, my mom said, but I remember when the times that they had tested me, I think at that time I was only using, excuse me, I was only using marijuana, so,
Uh-huh.
and acid. But, that doesn't show up in a drug test. So I would just have a friend over and have them pee in the cup for me. And I don't know, I just managed to pass them somehow or another for quite a while.
Yeah. So it sounds like they had some sense. I mean, to drug test a 15-year-old, they were wise to something.
Yeah.
But your use remained hidden for the most part.
Yes, it did. Yeah, for quite a while.
And so, if you look at it in hindsight, your parents might have thought there was some substance use during, say, age 15 to 18 or whatever, but not nearly the extent to what was really happening.
Right. Yeah, they had no idea what was really happening.
And how would you describe your relationships with your parents during this time? Was there a lot of conflict? Was there not a lot of conflict? Did you seem to enjoy each other's company or not, kind of thing?
At that time, there was a lot of conflict. During high school, so my mom and me, we fought pretty bad. And I was grounded.
Over anything in particular, or just rules in general? Yeah,
over rules, curfews, grades. They felt I didn't care about anything. Wasn't very responsible and reliable, and I was grounded until I moved out of the house at age 18. So my parents were pretty strict, and that's how they raised me. I had rules, and if I didn't follow them, I was grounded. So yeah, it's kind of hectic. I mean, I think that's kind of common, but yeah.
And when you turned 18, you were looking forward to leaving the home.
Yes. Yeah, I was. And my mom made it clear that she had hoped that I would get my own place when I was done with school. So I actually moved out right away.
Oh, so they supported that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she was pretty irritated with me by that point. I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to say that. I know my parents love me to death, but it was a stressful few years in high school.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was, which is not uncommon.
Yeah.
For anybody. And so when you moved out of it, now it sounds like during these high school years, while you had conflict, it sounds like you were the kind of young person who was cooperative, in the sense that I'm not hearing that you ran away or that you were really, so rebellious that you flaunted whatever you were doing right in front of them. I mean, it sounds like you were relatively cooperative.
Relatively. I mean, I didn't flaunt drug use in front of them or anything. I was probably rebellious to a point, and I did leave the house once, but she knew where I was. I was only gone for like a week, and that was probably my senior year of high school, I think. But nothing too crazy. I don't really remember them worrying about me, to a big extent or anything. I didn't really do that.
And would you say that during those years, were there moments or times where you felt good about being in this family, and your parents? I mean, you felt that maybe you felt closer to them and that things were okay, kind of thing. In amidst the conflict.
That doesn't really stick out. I mean, I knew that they were there for me, and I knew that they loved me, and they always supported anything I wanted to do. But, I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I wasn't, I didn't want to hang out with them. I didn't want to,
Right.
I wanted to be with my friends, and I wanted to get in my car and leave as much as possible.
And you didn't share the same interests.
No, not really. I mean, they took me to a lot of events. We've been on a lot of vacations, and they really exposed me to a lot of culture. But once I was able to drive and have my own independence, I wanted it. Yeah, I was off.
Yeah. And so what happened once you left the home in terms of drug use? Did that escalate?
Yes, it did. I think here. I moved out and got a place with a couple girls right away. And I mean, it was just party time. It was, when you move out of your parents' house for the first time, and I didn't go to college, so I didn't have those college years. It was just, I was working, I had to pay rent, but any chance I could get, I was partying and drinking and doing more drugs. And I think that first year is when I tried cocaine and mushrooms and meth and heroin at that time too. So.
And you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you kept things together somehow in terms of working a job, being self-sufficient, being independent.
Yeah, somehow. I mean, at one point, I remember having like 3 jobs. I mean, they were, Kentucky Fried Chicken and an arcade and those kind of jobs. But I kept it together for a while. And then at one point, I was working one job just as a front. I was working part-time at McDonald's, actually, and I was selling LSD on the side. Like, that was my major income. I had gotten some type of connection where we were getting large quantities, and so that was what was paying my bills for a while. And I remember my parents asking, how are you affording your rent? How are you? And I don't remember what I said, but I must have said something to calm their, to answer their question or whatnot. So they
had no idea.
So they didn't worry. Yeah. Yeah. No, they had no idea. So.
And it sounds like selling substances was a way of basically maintaining your lifestyle and keeping a roof over your head, and also being able to do what you wanted to do in life.
Yes. Yeah. It was, I mean, I hate to say it, but it was quick money. It was decent money.
Yeah. Yeah. And when would you say things changed for you? Would you have said that you were happy back in the day of this time?
Yeah, I was pretty happy. I mean, I had periods of depression, and that would happen here and there. Like one year I wouldn't be so good, and the next year I would be much better. And I know around the age 19 or so, by that time, I had done so much acid that I had to stop taking it. And I actually never took it again since. And I had a year-long psychotic hallucination episode, which was really intense. I mean, it was something else to try to navigate and kind of live with that. And I was in therapy too, thankfully, but I was on medication and I tried a few, but I've always kind of been the person to use a medication to get me through something. Like, life changes have always been my big trigger. And
stress.
Yeah, just just any kind of big life change, I guess. And so I would start a medication and take that for a year and a half, or however long it took to work my way out of it. And then I would stop using the medication until the next time I needed one.
And these were psychiatric medications for the psychosis.
They were antidepressants, really. I read about antipsychotics prior to doctors trying to prescribe them to me. So I had read so much about the side effects that I actually didn't want to be on them at all. I was too scared of things like tardive dyskinesia and all the just
side effects.
Some of the side effects that happened. So I avoided those as much as possible.
And you describe having been in a pretty much a psychotic state for about a year.
Yeah.
And how at some point it sounds like you worked your way out of that. Can you describe that?
I'm trying to remember. Honestly, I don't really remember how I worked my way out of that. I know it was constant for a year, and then I think it just subsided, but I don't really remember how or why. I think I always thought it just ran its course, maybe. I'm not sure.
It sounds terrifying.
It was really terrifying. I would driving down the road, and I would see shadow people, and I thought people could hear what I was thinking, and it was pretty bad. So, and
so you didn't know what you could trust, what was reality,
right, and
what might not be reality.
Right. Yeah, I was. I didn't trust anything or anybody, and everybody was out to get me. There's a lot of paranoia going on there.
Yeah. And with your parents, were your parents aware of the level of illness that you were experiencing, the psychosis? Were they aware of that? How were they responding to that?
I think they were aware of that. I've always been pretty open with them about things that I'm experiencing mentally. And, because I was still on their insurance. So I had to tell them, I need to go back to therapy. This is why. And I think at the time I was actually living 2 doors down from my parents. I was renting a place with some friends. And so they knew. I don't remember them really having any tips for me, but they were pretty understanding. I remember that. I remember being afraid somebody was going to come to their house or whatnot and get inside my car and stuff. And I remember telling my dad that, I can't park in the street. I have to park in the driveway. And this is why, and he was like, okay, if that makes you feel better, then no problem. So they were really good with stuff like that. So,
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. I don't know if they really understood, or could relate to it, but they did what they could.
And time went on. Now, were you still using substances during the 1 year of the psychosis?
Yeah. Yeah, I was selling them too during that time. So I just wasn't taking any hallucinogens.
Oh, okay. And you were working your 3 jobs, or maybe not?
No, at that time, I actually wasn't working again. I was using the money from the drugs to live. I think before that I had a factory. I mean, I went through a lot of jobs, but I had worked a factory job for a few months, and then I quit that job, and my mom kept asking me, how are you paying for this? Where are you getting money from? How are you paying your rent? And I told her that I had saved up money from my job and I was living off of that money. She was definitely suspicious.
Yeah.
And then...
Well, it sounds like you were convincing.
Yeah, I must have been. I mean, I like to think I was pretty convincing, but,
yeah. Well, it oftentimes goes with the territory, in an effort to protect the substance use. We think of what to say to explain behavior and such.
Right. And
to protect the use.
Everybody knows their parents too. So you always know what works for your parents and what you can say that they just won't believe instantly. So I knew what worked for them.
Yeah. And what happened if we move forward to the point that you became clearly in crisis, very clear, and it became known to your parents, and to some degree, it was a surprise to them. How old were you at that point, and how did that happen? How did they become aware?
They became aware because I was in jail. I had been thrown in jail, and I was detoxing off of heroin. And I called my parents to bail me out. And when my dad showed up, I was a mess. And
I'm sorry, how old were you?
I was 30.
Roughly?
I was 30 at that point. So they had suspected that I was on something prior to that. And because I'd be sleepy, I'd be kind of nodding off over at their house or, at a family gathering or whatnot. And, so they had their concerns. Like they say that they knew I was on something. They just didn't know what. So, but when my dad... And
it sounds like maybe they didn't know what to do. They had these concerns. They knew something was up. They brought it up to you many times, it sounds like. And during these discussions and such, it sounds like they didn't know what else that they could do.
Yeah, maybe that was it. I'm not
sure. I mean, it doesn't sound like they were reassured, or if they were reassured that things were fine, it sounds like it didn't last long. So it sounds like they might have been going through a pretty long period of being concerned, being worried, having a sense that something wasn't going well for you, health-wise and with your lifestyle, and maybe not knowing what they could do, how they could try to support you in dealing with that in some way.
Yeah. I mean, things like I used heroin consistently for about 4 years, and things kind of went downhill kind of quick. But the last year was definitely the worst. And my ex-husband even called my mom on Mother's Day that last year and told her that I was using drugs and she needed to help me. But he had told her that I was on cocaine. And they showed up at my house or my apartment or whatnot and confronted me and my boyfriend at the time. And I denied it. He lied right to her face and was very convincing. And so they were just kind of like, okay, well, they seem all right. He said no. She said no. Maybe her ex-husband doesn't know what he's talking about or so on, but they still had their suspicions something was going on just because of my behavior. And I think I was sick pretty often. So I think I was also missing things that, family things that I should have been at.
Yeah.
But yeah, they didn't.
Yeah. And that's very common, of course, with escalating use.
Right.
It sounds like they didn't know what to do beyond that.
Right. Yeah. How do you help somebody who's telling you, no, I'm fine. Nothing's going on. I think that'd be a confusing point for most people.
If we think about what could have been helpful if it was available to families, and that's oftentimes the case, they didn't know what to do. They didn't understand what their options were. They likely were not knowledgeable about substance use disorder, and how to intervene in that as a family.
Right. Yeah.
And so when they were met with the basically declining their offers or their concern and not looking to get help, all they could do was walk away.
Yeah.
When you were arrested, your parents found out because you needed someone to bail you out of jail, to help you with the legal issues, or maybe the reality was just so obvious that there was no denying it.
Yeah, I was in such bad shape that I couldn't drive my car, and my car had been impounded before I was thrown in jail. And so when my dad picked me up from jail, the first thing he said to me, actually through the glass while I was in the cell, was, "Will you get help?" And I don't think he really knew what kind of help I needed at all. But, he just was like, "I'm not bailing you out if you're not going to get help for whatever's going on with you." And so I said yes. And when they released me and I walked out, he said, "Well, we're going to go get your car. Can you drive your car?" And I was like, "No, Dad, I can't drive my car. Like I'm dragging my feet. I'm just a wreck." And I think
so. He was having trouble coming to terms with the extent of your impairment. For him to ask if you could drive your car, he wasn't seeing it.
Right. I think he just thought I had a rough night in jail. Mm-hmm. And it's not the first time I had been in jail all night, but I think that was the first time that he had to bail me out, and especially in that condition. And
you were going through opioid withdrawal.
Yes, it was really bad. No, I could barely get to his truck. I was freezing. My nose was running. I was sore. I had no energy. My whole cell, the whole floor of it was covered with tissue from the whole night. It was like a tissue carpet in there. It was disgusting. And I was a wreck, and I was shivering, and I kept rolling the window down and rolling it back up because my blood pressure was out of control, and I was getting hot and cold and hot and cold. So I'm, he's driving, and his daughter's sitting in the seat next to him, and I'm rolling the window up and down and up and down. And I'm kind of like crouched over because my stomach hurts. And he asked me, "What is it?" And I just said, "It's heroin." And he didn't really say anything, but then about 20 minutes away from their house, something happened where my hands went into a spasm. My hands and feet spasmed. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know that was something that could happen. I was like, "I don't know what's going on." I said, "You have to take me to the hospital. We have to go to the hospital right now." So he took me to the hospital, and then all my family came and met me there. And I spilled everything, just let it all out right there.
Yeah. How was the hospital staff responding to you?
They were actually very nice. And for 2006, I was surprised by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I had gone to a hospital once before. And I had a split moment where I was like, I just can't do this anymore. Hospital's right here. I'm going to ask them what kind of help they have. And I went in there to ask if they had any help for people on drugs, and they handed me a list of local 12-step meetings and therapies and counseling centers or whatnot. And that was it. And she basically sent me out the door. So I didn't really have very high expectations when I went to the hospital that day with my dad, but they were really good. They really took care of me, and they were really compassionate. I mean,
they admitted you.
They admitted me, yeah. And they couldn't do a lot, really. They kept me warm, and they gave me some anti-nausea medication, and they let me stay there for about 4 hours. They gave me some fluids, and that was about it. But they were really kind.
Well, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And then you, and do you know, looking back, it sounds like in hindsight, that was a turning point for you. and you had made a decision that you did not want to use substances any longer, and you wanted to get into recovery. Was it? Do you have a sense of what it was at that? Was it how bad you felt physically and how you had felt so bad for so long that it just came to you?
Yeah, it was exhausting. It was really exhausting. I mean, every day I was running around with, my boyfriend at the time, and we had to steal like $600 in liquor to buy $300 in heroin every day, in Detroit. And that had gone on for years. And it was...
That sounds kind of dangerous.
Yeah, it wasn't very safe. But yeah, it just... It was survival. Yeah. And when I was in that jail cell and I could hear him going through it in the other cell. I mean, he was just not having a good time about it. I mean, I was very quiet, but I was just thinking about everything, like, I just don't want to do this anymore. It's not worth it. I just, and I knew once I told my parents, like, it was over, like that was it. It's kind of like if I could still hide.
It was over for you.
Yeah, it was over for me.
It wasn't. It sounds like maybe it changed from, pulling the wool over their eyes to, Amanda, I'm not going to lie to myself anymore.
Yeah.
As much as it might have been, I'm not going to lie to my parents anymore.
Yeah, I just knew that if I came out about it, then yeah, it was like a reality for me. It was like, okay, I got to accept that this is an issue, and I have to put it out there too.
And from that point, did you get treatment that some people might call rehabilitation, any kind of like psychosocial support, counseling, residential program, outpatient program, self-help meetings? What did you go through, if anything?
Well, I went to detox for a few days at a substance use hospital that also has methadone and stuff. I was there for like 3 days, and then they transferred me to a women's and children's facility for 21 days. And I was there, but I didn't get any of the other treatment that you mentioned. I mean, I had talked to a counselor, I think, once a week while I was at the inpatient, and there was some meetings throughout the day that you could attend if you wanted to while I was in detox. And then I had outpatient after inpatient. And I think that lasted maybe 2 months or so. Mm-hmm. I went to 12-step meetings for 90 days. That was about it.
Threw yourself into that?
Yeah. I mean, they just, they kind of tell you that's how you're going to make it. One meeting, 90 days, every day, And I didn't do that, but I went here and there, and I went when I was at inpatient because we all had to go. So I went to those meetings. Yeah. But, back
now, and pardon me, in hindsight, do you think the treatment was helpful for you, or maybe somewhat helpful, or do you feel like you did a lot of it on your own?
I think it was helpful in the way that I wasn't left with my own thoughts. I wasn't just sitting at my parents' house trying to figure everything out, and having access to my car or whatnot. Like so I think that was helpful, and it did take me a while to adjust. I did try to leave there at one point, I think within the first week, but, and they'd give you some tools, like it gives your mind something to think about and focus on in that first stage of really early recovery.
Right.
But I can't really think of any tools that I may have learned back then that I use still today. Not off the top of my head.
And maybe it might have been because you had been using so much for so long. You might have been. It might have taken your brain a certain amount of time to heal and recover enough to retain information and to be thinking on a deep level. I'm just imagining.
Yeah, that took a really long time. That took years. It really did. Years. Yeah.
Wow. And what was your sense of what it was like for your parents? You were in treatment. You were focused on recovery. It sounds like you were doing all the right things. Do you have a sense of what it was like for your parents? I mean, did they talk with you much about it or often? Did they not? Did they keep it to themselves? What was that like?
Looking back on it, they were heartbroken. They really were. I mean, my dad was in tears when he dropped me off at the detox place, and they would come and visit every weekend when I was an inpatient, and they really listened to all the information they were given and stuff, just trying to understand everything. But I think they had a hard time kind of figuring out how to cope with all that in their own way. And I know my mom was really open about it. She told everybody, and she told everybody in the family. She told her friends what was going on and everything. And I think that's how she coped with it. But yeah, they had to figure all that out also. But I know they're pretty devastated.
Yeah. And certainly we can imagine that. And your mom got a lot of support. She was very open and she got a lot of support.
She did. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I remember she had all the...
That's remarkable.
Yeah, she had all the family send me cards while I was in rehab and everything. I got so much mail and such wonderful letters and cards from everybody. It was really great. That's all because of her.
So, now, as we know, a lot of families go through very intense feelings, sometimes despair, sometimes shame, embarrassment, fear. Sounds like maybe your mom didn't struggle much with shame or embarrassment in the sense that she was able to share it very freely.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't really think she did. I mean, she had grown up with an alcoholic grandma and stuff, but my parents were very they didn't drink, they didn't smoke, it wasn't they really didn't party. I mean, they enjoyed life, but I can't even count on one hand the times I've seen either of them have a beer or a drink. So I think that I think they probably wondered if they did something wrong to maybe cause this, just because that's a typical concern from parents. Right. But I don't think she really had any shame.
Yeah.
Nothing I know.
And in terms of your father, do you have a sense, was he as open as your mother was? Was he talking about it? Was he discussing it? Was he getting support around it?
I know he went to some Al-Anon meetings, and I think he read what he could on it. I think he might have had a book or whatnot, and he tried to learn what he could. But as far as being open about it to people, and even today, he doesn't like to talk about it. I think it just it hurts him so much, and he doesn't really want to think about, that time and, myself and them going through all that he kind of internalizes that, I guess. I don't really know how open he was with friends or anything. I try not to really ask him that many questions, because when I do, it's kind of, obvious that he doesn't really want to talk about it. So,
yeah, well, almost as if it was a nightmare that he doesn't want to go back and experience that nightmare by talking much about it.
Yeah, I just think I just think he has like a lot of compassion and care inside of him, and I think it just really hurts, the whole thing. I think he just hurts for what I went through, what he went through.
Yeah, understandable. And maybe it would describe, if you could, how your recovery has changed, what it's been like for you going through the years. And I gather it's been somewhere around 10 years of recovery for you at this point. Congratulations on that. That's quite a remarkable accomplishment.
Thank you.
And I'm happy for you and for your family.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Has it changed over the years? Maybe you could describe the progression.
It's definitely changed over the years. It was a really hard process, and it was definitely a roller coaster. And the first 5 years were pretty bad. I mean, it's kind of weird. It's like you feel like you have everything together in a way immediately. You're like, I'm off drugs. I can get a job. I can do this. Like, I got off of this. It takes you a minute to realize like all the damage that you've done, and trying to figure out how to live life without substances now is a really difficult thing to do. You kind of have to relearn everything. And, I went back to school a year, like my second year of sobriety or whatnot, but had a really hard time with school and faced a lot of stigma and judgment from the headmaster there. And that actually caused a lot of stress, and it brought up some of those old paranoia tendencies and whatnot. And, I eventually was diagnosed with fibromyalgia during my second year of school. And that was devastating. I couldn't get out of bed and had to go on this whole medical leave to try to find treatment, which was difficult. And that was a whole other ordeal, trying to work out treatment and getting pain management. And then the pain management got out of control, and I had another breakdown and was admitted into a psychiatric hospital for a short time. And it wasn't until after all that, and after starting buprenorphine treatment, that I actually started to somewhat stabilize and get, a handle on things.
And the buprenorphine, that was for the pain from the fibromyalgia?
Yes. And so I was on opioid pain medication when I was admitted into the hospital, and they take you off of everything when you're admitted. They remove all drugs, they stabilize you, and then they medicate you. And because they had, stopped my pain medication, I started to go into withdrawal from that. So they started me on Suboxone. And it was probably the only way I would have gotten out of the hospital, because I wasn't getting out of bed. I felt so awful. And
so you got pain relief from Suboxone? Yes.
Yeah. And I'm still on it today. It manages my pain really well, which is great.
Which is perhaps somewhat uncommon.
Yeah, I think it is. Probably.
Yeah, from what I hear from people who are struggling with pain, that it doesn't necessarily do much for it to help control it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure why people say that. I don't know if it's biological, physical thing. I don't know, but it works great for me.
Yeah. And so that's now during this period of time, did you have cravings, urges, thoughts about resuming drug use, or never bothered you?
I definitely thought about it. I mean, I'll still randomly have drug dreams today, like last month it happens. But in the early years, it was much worse. I mean, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on things somehow. And I was really open about it. Like I told everybody, I told all my friends that I used to get high with, I went to rehab. I'm sober now. I'm not using drugs, and they didn't really believe me, I don't think. But, to me, it's like when I tell you my truth, like I'm telling you that to keep myself honest. And so that's what I did was I told everybody that I would meet somebody and be like, hey, my name's Amanda. I just got out of rehab like 3 months ago. And so I used to be addicted to heroin. And yeah, it was a bit much, but it helped me stay honest and everything. And
it seemed like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah. Like I kind of knew that would help me get through things. So.
Yeah. And it's remarkable that your parents were and have been supportive of that. And they're still supportive, and you're very close to your parents.
Yeah, I think, I think, I don't think they really understood it for a long time, why it's like telling everybody and was so open about it, even years afterwards and stuff, but I think now they see how I've turned it into something good. And I think they're really proud of that. So they've always wanted me to help people in some way and use my story to help others.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Now, if you think back, is there anything that you from your life experience, both as a person and also as a member of this family, and what you've learned being in recovery and being a recovery advocate and a pain advocate, do you have some thoughts about what resources, services might be helpful for families, for parents who are going through addiction similar to this, and maybe ideas about some things that are not helpful for families going through this, a loved one with addiction?
Talking to people definitely works. Don't hold it in and learn everything you can and talk to people. I think a lot of people are going through this now, and but there really isn't like one thing that comes to mind. Like I don't have a website that I would direct anybody to. I think everybody's situation is different and people handle things differently. And I think it's...
But pardon me. It sounds like your parents had an intuitive sense as to they were still going to love you. They were still going to be there for you. They were always going to be there for you. And maybe the condition was that you needed to accept help and that you needed to work as hard as you could on your recovery. But with that in place, I mean, it sounds like they had an intuitive sense that they would support you any way that they could. And that's pretty remarkable to have an intuitive sense, because with our society, much of the there's so much stigma around this, and it's not only for the people who are suffering with substance use disorders, but also for their families. And all the time we hear families talk about how ashamed they felt, how guilty they felt, how hopeless they felt, and that they just didn't know what to do, and they didn't know what to make of different types of treatment approaches. They didn't know how to support their loved one. They didn't know what to make of it. And yet it sounds like your parents, in spite of living in this kind of society, in the way that we look at drug use, drug problems, and drug illnesses, they had just an intuitive sense that they weren't going to abandon you. They weren't going to turn the other way. For example, I don't hear anything about tough love, about letting you hit bottom.
Yeah.
Good point. They didn't do that. No. They could have, your father could have left you in the jail. Mm-hmm. And indeed, a lot of the advice that families may get is, don't bail her out. It'll just bring her back to drugs.
Right.
And she has to suffer deeply and for a long time before she's going to be able to gain recovery. So they, from your description, they knew not to do that tough love approach. They knew to be there for you and to, I don't know if it's trust or hope, but they kept coming back in your life. They kept coming back to express their concern. And even when you denied and minimized, the next time it came to their attention, they came back again. And so it sounds like they have a remarkably intuitive sense of just what to do, what was going to work, what was going to help. And they maintained as positive a relationship with you as they could. And so that when you were ready to ask for help, they wanted to be there and they wanted to help you do that. And I'm not hearing about any yelling or any name calling or screaming or, anything like that, which we know can happen in families. I'm not hearing anything like that. So it sounds like they had a remarkably intuitive sense of just what to do and what was going to work. And indeed, it has worked.
Yeah, they really did. And it was, I didn't expect it to be honest. Because I was raised with tough love, but something happened that day when my dad picked me up from jail. There was no tough love. They listened to me. They, my mom asked a lot of questions and they were just very caring and loving. And they
didn't judge you.
No, they didn't. They didn't judge me at all. They didn't jump to like assumptions or anything. It was kind of like all the pieces came together for them,
Yeah.
That's totally what it was. I mean, I remember my mom saying, "Oh, so that time when you hid those drug test results from us, it was because of this." And it's all came together for them. And I think they realized this is it. We have to help her. We just have to do what we can. And
they valued that from the knowledge. The knowledge about, for example, she would say, so that's why you did this. So that's why you did this. So pieces were coming together in their minds. Yeah. And it was important for them to try to understand.
Yeah.
And that's what they were doing just naturally.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
That's remarkable.
She remembered a lot of occasions and instances that maybe like didn't sit so well with her, and she recalled a lot of them. I remember, and and she asked, and I'd be like, "Yes, Mom, I was high that time," and it just she pieced everything together.
And how about now? It sounds like you don't talk much about it to your dad. I don't know how often it might come up with you and your mom. And maybe it just doesn't come up. Do you have discussions with your parents? And I do recall several months ago, you and I thought of this. How cool would it be for you to interview your mom about what it was like for her? And you went and did that, and you created a blog out of it, which was very popular.
Thanks.
So is it something that comes up, it doesn't come up very often, or you're the one who brings it up? What is it like now?
It doesn't come up in the way that it used to when I was in early recovery. Like they had all their answers, back then. Now, if it comes up, it's usually because I'm talking about something I'm involved with, and your
advocacy work.
Right. Yeah. Advocacy work, or maybe we'll see something on TV or watch a movie, and she'll turn to me and say, "Was that what you were like? Is that how you used to think about things?" She would ask. She'll do that sometimes, but and there's also like instances where it's just like my dad had problems trying to fill some medication for my mom after her knee surgery. So, just the things I've learned along the way and dealt with, I'll talk to him about stuff like that now. Like, yes, there's new laws, so it comes up in little ways, but not like how it used to, not directly related to my experience, I guess.
Yeah. So it's more accidental or coincidental. If, for example, if you see a movie that involves drug use, and then your mother very naturally will ask you that, if that was like for you, and you can talk about it. Well, it sounds like with your parents not drinking, there's no substances in their home. They wouldn't go through some of the challenges that other families go through in terms of what do they do when their loved one with addiction is around, and how do they navigate that kind of thing. So it sounds like...
No. I mean, they had alcohol in the house when I was a kid, but it was locked up pretty early on. So, and it was old alcohol, but
yeah,
that was about it.
Maybe at this point it would be good to describe what life is like for you now. I mean, how you're feeling now, maybe give people a sense of hope about recovery being a good thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
Assuming that that's true.
No, it's true.
Well, you've got a relationship. You've got a stable relationship you've been in for, sounds like, several years. Yeah. You've got a nice home that you and Eric have made for yourselves. You've got your advocacy work. You get excited in life, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It sounds quite possibly that trust, the breaches of the trust and the deceptive behavior that went on to protect drug use probably did a lot of damage in terms of trust. Has that changed for you?
I earned their trust. Things are really good now, thankfully, but it took a long time. It actually took 7 years. And I remember that for some reason.
7 years?
7 years it took to get to the point where I felt like, okay, like people are trusting me and my parents are trusting me again.
It's a long time.
It is a long time. It's a really long time. And I don't know if it's like that for everybody, but that's how it was for me. And I didn't even, steal from my parents or anything like that. If I borrowed money from them back then, I did it honestly. And I might not have said what it was actually for, but, I went to them and asked for the money. It took a long time, and it was a lot of work. And it even took me probably three or more years to even realize that I wasn't being trusted, because sometimes Sometimes when you're in, early recovery, you think, well, I'm off the drugs. Like, I'm good to go. Everybody should believe me now, but it just
Right.
doesn't
Oh,
work
yeah.
like that. So it took me a long time to realize that I had to gain that trust back, and I had to figure out how to do it. And I had to learn to be reliable and responsible. And I had to try to show up places on time and pay people back when I was supposed to, and just keep being honest, consistently. And yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was totally worth it. And things are so much better now. And I have such a closer, tighter relationship with both of them that I ever had, that it was all worth it to me. I mean, I value my parents more than I ever have. So, and I don't know if that's just like part of growing up and getting older, or if it's because of what I went through, or both, but yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And that somewhere along 7 years, how did you understand that you had earned their trust? Was it something dramatic? Was it a discussion, or was it just a feeling or a thought that just came to your mind? Gosh, I think they trust me. What was it like?
I think it was probably all of those things. I know I definitely thought it. And I think, for those 7 years, I was pretty careful. Like, for example, if I needed to borrow money, I kind of had to, I couldn't just go to them and say, hey, I need $50 for this bill or something. I kind of had to like reassure them. And I also had the understanding that, they may not help me. They may not trust me that I'll pay them back or whatnot. And I don't want them to worry that I'm using, this money for something else. I actually remember like keeping receipts and things, and, kind of having to prove myself for a long time with a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And then I just remember one day, and I might even have said something like, you're not worried that, loaning me this money you're not worried about it. And I just remember them being like, no, you've been doing good for so long now. Like, we're not worried anymore. And it was just like, wow,
How nice. Yeah. How nice to have the opportunity to earn it back. And I mean, your parents and you it sounds like you were a partnership. You were working together.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I mean, so much that you're describing of your parents and their response. So much of it is just perfect.
Yeah,
it's like it's good for them because it has brought their relationship back with their daughter, who they love so dearly, and it's also been good for you, and so it really has been a partnership, and it sounds like the three of you have needed that to happen.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah, I think so.
And it sounds to me like not that you don't have struggles at this point in time, but it sounds to me like you've really achieved a lot of stability and nice things in life at this point. Can you just describe that a little bit, what you've achieved and what you have found for yourself, what you've made for yourself in recovery?
I've learned a lot, and I've gained an immense amount of stability just in my home life and in family life. And about 10 years ago, I met somebody from out of town who didn't use drugs or anything like that. And even though he was very young at the time when I met him. He grew into a very hardworking, responsible, caring, and understanding person who just lets me be me. And, you know, we own a house, and that's been very good. And that's also helped my parents also, because I had dated some people that they probably didn't think were too good for me. And it's almost like when he came along, you know, there was a sense of relief there. You know, they were able to leave the state because they felt that I was in good enough hands, and that they didn't have to worry about me, or that I wasn't going to call them randomly with some dramatic crisis problem. So, but you know, it was a long road to get here. I mean, I went through a lot, and I really had to work on learning and gaining integrity, and just having respect for people, and like learning empathy, which was a really hard one for me. I lived a very selfish and nearly sociopathic kind of tunnel vision life where I didn't care. I didn't care what my actions, you know, how they affected other people, or my future or anything. And I removed a lot of drama out of my life, and it's been good.
Those are all symptoms of addiction.
Yeah, it was
that self-centeredness, the lack of consideration, caring for other people, just totally focused on what you want in your life and how you have chosen to try to make it work.
And I was like that for, 15 some years, and years after I stopped using drugs. So it, feels like most of my life I was just this jerk to people, but I really had to learn how to change and how to.
Well, you had an illness, and the illness was one that affected your behavior, and it affected the way you thought about yourself, the way you thought about other people. And so you were doing what you were meant to do as a person suffering with addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. I reprogrammed myself, And
it sounds like I've heard it said that maturity stops at the time that heavy drug misuse starts. And it sounds like that's been true for you, that you had to learn responsibility and empathy and such, so you were picking up where you kind of left off as a teenager.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. So it was almost like, I was 30 and I was in rehab, but I was still kind of in a place of being 15, and it's taken a long.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It's taken a long time, but I'm glad I got to a much better place.
Well, it sounds like you've done it in your time, in the time frame that was right for you, that was natural for you.
Yeah.
And it couldn't have been done any sooner or quicker, or maybe even any easier.
Yeah, I don't think it could have. Maybe if I had found a therapist that could have helped me with something like that, but I didn't have a lot of luck with very helpful therapists and tools in the past 10 years. So I had to figure it out on my own.
And it sounds like you did it largely with your parents and with your current relationship, your partner.
Yeah, I just kind of process things openly and talk to them about things, and with friends too. I kind of I check myself all the time, still always, making sure that I'm looking at things correctly. And so.
Yeah. And in my dealings with you, I've noticed how remarkably open that you are. And if you have a question, you'll ask a question. And you don't seem to worry about whether it seems to be a question that makes you sound bright or makes you sound not bright, but you just, and you oftentimes will say, maybe I missed something, or did I miss something? And, so it's very pleasant to interact with you in that kind of way. And it's refreshing, and it's, you're a good role model for that. You will ask questions, and you will take risks. You will share your perspective without knowing necessarily how the other person is going to react to it, or if they're going to share it, or if they might, judge you or put you down or argue with you or debate with you. But you're very open like that. And just as you've described, as ever since you stopped using, you just are very open. You speak your truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do it constantly. If I'm not sure about something, or, and I don't like to make assumptions, I'm very careful about that. I don't like to react to things quickly. I want to see all sides, and I'm constantly, like I said, checking myself on that. And I'll say to people like, well, it seems like this, but maybe I'm missing something, or I don't know the whole story. I'm always trying to take into consideration everything, and even the perspective of the other person that I'm talking to and whatnot. Everybody's in a different situation and going through their own things, and our assumptions in life and everything can really create drama sometimes. So I do what I can to avoid that and just be really understanding.
Yeah. And it occurs to me, it seems to be how this podcast has gone. Okay. Now I totally lost that train of thought. In terms of how you've discussed your life experiences and such, you're just so open, and you seem very comfortable talking about it, and talking about some really painful periods and situations, and yet you seem you're at peace with it. I don't know if that's the best expression, but you come to terms with it. You're at peace with it. It doesn't intimidate you. You just seem very comfortable with your self-disclosure.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like I have to be, I just put it out there because I'm the type of person, whereas if I didn't, and if I held it all in, which is something I used to do at a young age, it's not good for me. It's not very healthy. And so I kind of put it out there, and I say what I have to say. And if somebody doesn't get it, or if they don't like how I do things, then I can't really do a lot about that. There's certain,
and you move on.
There's certain people who get me, and those are the people I keep in good company with. So.
Yeah. Well, I want to congratulate you on your success. It's a remarkable story, and the success of your whole family, your partner as well. It's really if there's ever a story, a life story, a personal experience that can give families struggling with addiction a reason to be hopeful, this is one of those. So I really want to thank you for sharing that so openly, and for helping put together a message that can give families hope, no matter what stage of the addiction, the active addiction or recovery that they might happen to be in. So I want to thank you for that gift. I think it's remarkable, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I don't think I really realized how much of a team effort it was until we just sat and discussed this, but it really was. It really took everybody, and all the years.
And we talk about connection and addiction as being a disease of a lack of connection, social connectedness, and of recovery for many as needing to have social connectedness, develop our support systems, social networks, and interact with people. It's remarkable. You've done it, and you do it. You continue to do it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. It's always nice to talk about this stuff, and it helps me process things even more. And I realize a lot more, which always helps. I think that's really important too. I think that's the one thing that people sometimes fail to do in recovery, whether you're family or, the person with the illness. There's always learning going on, that growth. I feel like that growth that I had was so important and so crucial to sustaining and the longevity of my recovery, and just, still learning from it and being open to learn from it.
Thank you so much. I think we're done.
Yeah, I think so.
Are you exhausted?
My day starts at like 4 or 5 o'clock, so I'm all right. You're probably pretty exhausted. It's got late for you, but...
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Family Addiction Coaching. And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the show. We'll continue to interview interesting and strong families as long as there is a need for this information in the community. Make sure to visit our website, www.opioidcoaching.com. If you think you might want professional coaching for yourself or your family, Patrick Doyle is available. Have a peaceful day.